So let's see what we have on this one. We have some hexagons, right? But they're beautifully arranged so nicely, right? Perfectly. And the other thing is, if we look at the code, right, if I make some changes, again, we're going to use some variables. So for instance, if I want to increase the gap between them to zero point 0.3 instead of zero point 0.2, you see, they increase, but they're perfectly arranged with that gap. The other thing I can change is the radius. Let's say I want to change the radius to 3. So they should become a little bigger, right? But again, look how perfectly arranged they are, right? The depth controls how thick they are, right? So if I increase that, they're just a little thicker, right? And also, if I go down here and I change this one to, let's say, 1, and I run it, and you see they all move to the right. They could also move down. Let's make it -2 for Z. So I'm going to run, and you see they went down. See, they went down on the Z, all of them, right? And I don't have to change any of the code because we're using variables. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to open a new document with the startup code, right? I think this is it, the startup code, you see. So you have that, and if we run it, it gets rid of everything, and we have nothing, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do this a little different. Actually, uh, we're going to do this a little differently. So your code, I think your code has to start over here. Let me go get this, right? So your code has to start here. So I'm just going to move this here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to use in this one, besides variables, we're going to use a function. So we're going to use a function and we're going to make the hexagon. So I'm going to say define function, what? Hexagon, and we need to give it something so we can make the hexagon. Well, what are we going to give it? We're going to give it the position, right? The location, and we're going to give it the radius. The hexagon needs a radius, and it needs what else does it need? So, oops, sorry, in the wrong place. It needs the depth, how thick, and also the material. So we're going to give it the material. And then we'll put a semicolon over here, right? So we get the location, radius, the depth, and the material. And now we're going to make the hexagon. So to make the hexagon, it's a bunch of code here, but I'm going to give it to you. The vertices of a hexagon are 6. So I'm going to write 6, and I'm going to move this over so you can see the whole thing. So we actually don't need this. Actually, we should just write 6 over here. So vertices 6. So you see, this is the hexagon, right? It's actually a cylinder, but with vertices 6, we got the radius, we got the depth, and we got the location. And then we also make the material, right? So you have to copy that code, right? It's a little bit, but you can do it. And then if we run this, you see nothing still happens, right? So if I run it, nothing happens. But there are no errors, right? Well, the thing is with a function is you have to run the function. You just can't have it. You have to run it. So I'm going to watch. I'll show you. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to declare a couple of things, right? I'm going to say radius for this one is, let's say 1. And then I'm going to say the depth is equal to, let's say 0.4 or 2, something like that, right? And then I have to make the material, let's see, location. So I'm going to say x equals 0, y equals 0, z equals 0, and then that's the location. And then I need the material. So mat equals make material. Right, so now I have all the things I need to make this hexagon. So I have to make it. So I go hexagon and I give it the location, right? X comma Y comma Z. That's the location. And then what's the next one? It says radius over here, right? So I have to do it in order. Radius. Well, I have the radius. Did I spell it right? Yeah. And I have the depth. and I have the mat. So these are parentheses here, right? So now if I run this, I should get a hexagon right in the middle. See? Right in the middle of everything. And if we try a couple of things, like for instance, if I want to change another hexagon with radius 2 and I run it, you'd see it's a little bigger. Of course, it has a thickness of 0.2. You can see if we want to increase that, let's say to 4. If I run it again, you see it's a little thicker. If I want to move it, let's say I want to move it to 3, and I run it, you see now it moves to 3. So I control everything from here, right? So let's go back to radius 1. Okay, so this is the first one. I'm going to call this x1, I think. X1, Y1, and Z1. Okay, so I'm going to have to change that to 1 here. So that should run this and nothing should change, right? So I'm good. I think it's too thick for me, so I'm going to make it a little less. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's make the next one, right? So the next one, I'm going to, so the depth and the radius are going to stay the same. So I'm going to just move this down and I'm going to make a comment. So this is row 1, right? So row 1, because I want to make a few rows. So row 1, here it is, right? And I'm going to copy this, right? And I'm going to make the second one. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to make the second one down here. And it's just going to call that X, Y, and Z. So X, Y, and Z. I don't need the material, right? I just want to make one material. So uh, so let's rearrange this just a little bit. So for this one, we're just going to keep the material up here. It's the same, but the X and Y and Z will be different. So that looks good. So now, of course, I have to move. I can't make this one because if I make another one, they're right on top of each other, right? So if I run this and I run and I go to modeling, you see, and if I show you that if I select one, they're right on top of each other, right? So we don't want that. So we have to move it. So the question is how much to move it? Well, so to move it, there's a new variable we need, and I'll show you what it is, right? So if you look at a hexagon, this is the radius. We need this D1. You see, we have to move this one. So we have to take this one and we have to move it to the right with D1. See, well, actually twice D1, right? So if we can calculate D1, it's twice D1, and maybe there's a little bit of a gap, right? If we want a gap, but we need D1. So there is a formula for this, and I'm going to give it to you. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to give you that formula. D1 has to do with the square root of 3. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move x, excuse me, x1 is 0. We'll keep that. This x is, I'm going to move it. So I'm going to say x1 plus how much I want to move it. Well, I'm going to move it. Remember I said 2 times d1, 2 times d1. And now if I run it, it is perfectly there. But you see, so, but I want a gap also, right? So I'm going to say d1 plus the gap. Right now, gap is, what did I set the gap? Well, I didn't set it. So let's set the gap to a number, right? So let's say gap equals 0.2, so that'll stay. And now I have plus gap. So let's run this, right? And let's see what I got. Oh, I lost it. I think it's here. So run it now, and you see I got a gap. So based on this value, right? Um, so let's make the next one. So the next one is I'm gonna copy, right? And I'm gonna paste it. So now I think it'll be 3 times, right? X1 plus 3 times. Let's see. I think I need a parentheses here. Yeah. So 3 times D1 um, plus gap. Yeah, but I think it's not 3, but it's 4. Right. Oh, did I delete it? So it's 4, and I'm going to have to use parentheses here, these two, right? So I could parenthesize these two also, um, just to be consistent, right? So if I run it now, I think I have an error. Times. I have to say times. So times, and now I run it, and I got another error. What does this say? Oh, D1. Oh, I put the times in the wrong place. I have two of them by mistake. So here, you see, and let's make the gap 0. I just want to see them right next to each other, right? So if I make the gap 0, see, they're perfectly on top of each other. So let's change that back to point 1, for instance. Text 1, run script, okay. So I'm going to do a few of these, right? So I'm going to do like 6 altogether, right? So can you continue this? And I think you have to say 6, right? And I'm going to run, and now I have more. So can you finish it up and do 6 altogether? Okay, I got my 6, right? I got my 6 here for row 1. So now I'm going to make row 2. So I'm just going to copy this first one, okay? Don't copy everything because things are going to change a little bit. So I'm going to move it over here. This is row 2. And this first one is not going to be called 2. So this is 2 and 2, and it's going to be based on 1. So wherever x1 is, I'm going to use that as my reference. So y1 and z1, of course, this will be 2, this will be 2, and this will be 2. The only thing is, though, we have to move this to a different location, right? This second row, I have to move the x to the right. So, and I have to move y up, right? So if I say x plus, let's say d1, let's see what happens, right? And I run it, and okay, that's not too bad, but the y is wrong, right? So if I say d1, let's say d1, I want to move it up, right? And see, it's not the right number. For x, it's okay. Let's make it 2 times d1. It's still not right, but I mean, I just want to show you. See, so it's not um, right. I think d1 plus. So let's make the gap 0. Always go back to 0 because I wanted to see how perfect it is, right? So if I run it now, I just want to. Again, it went. Okay. Well, I guess it's this one. I'm going to save this, right? Say save. Call this hexagons um, students. So let me save that. Right. So now, well, sorry. So let's see. Oh yeah, so I want to run this, right? And these are okay, but you see, the X is good. The X is good. This is in the right place, but the Y is not wrong. Well, it's another actually value. So if I go and show you, you see, we're looking for not D1, we're looking for D2. D2 is another formula, you see, because I'm looking this distance, this red one, you see, this red one, and that's another formula using Pythagorean. So let me give it to you, right? I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to give you that formula. So this is D2. D2 is another formula and it's based on D1, right? So now I have that. So this is really, let's try, I think it's D2, just D2, maybe plus gap, right? We'll take care of that in a moment. You see, look, fits perfectly in there, right? But I don't have a gap, right? So I think I have to include the gap and include the gap. Of course, right now the gap is 0, but let's change the gap to point 1 and see how it looks. Wow, that's it. So it looks like this is ready to go for the second row, right? So for the second row, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to start the second row. So here it is. This is the second one, but it's based on x2, right? Not x1, x2. So let's see, and this is g1 is okay. So let's see if I get that second one. Oh, the y is based on x y2. Y2, and this should be Z2. And all of these actually, I should have based all of these. This is my mistake. I should have based all of these on Y1 and Z1. So Y1 and Z1, because if I change it, I want these to update. So let me go back and update this, right? Just in case I change it. So that's okay. And this one should be X2, Y2, uh, X2, Y2, Z2. So let me run it now. And there it is. So ready to go. I'm going to go to the next one, right? And the next one is going to be 4 times, if I remember correctly, 4 times. Run it again. So they're falling in. So can you finish that row? Okay, so I got my 6, right? I have my 6, my row 2, I have my new material. I based it, X2, I based on X1, right? And I have my 6. So again, what's nice about this using variables, let's say I want to change this to 2 just to show you one more time, right? And I run it, and look how they're still nicely rearranged, right? If I want to change the gap, let's say gap point 2, and I run it. Okay, the gap increased, of course, but they're still nicely, perfectly arranged, right? So now I'm going to make the third row, right? So I'm going to make the third row. So the third row is, I think, uh, going to, I'm going to just copy the whole thing, right? Here, or did I get it? I think I got it. Oh, copy. And let me see if I have it. So the third row right here. So third row, row 3. So the third row, X has to go back to its original position, X 1, right? It has to go back, so it's not to the right anymore. So I'm going to use X2 equals X1, but the Y is doubled. So I think we have to double this. So let's see if I'm right? So if I do this, and this is X2, X2, so now I run. Okay, so all I had to do was just move all of them up a bit, right? That's all I had to do. So how many rows we have? So 3. So you have to make 6 rows. So your job is to make 6 rows. So we did 3 together. You should be able to do it.